I'm Drakyrrr, hello.
Hi, Matt.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
First of all, congratulations for making this whole event. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm enjoying this a lot.
Awesome, yeah,
So-
me too. This has been a great venue, a great event.
Yeah, it is, and I'm happy to meet you all, to be honest. It's a great opportunity for us all to be here and try everything you have brought to us, and also to meet people like you that have made this game.
Oh, thank you.
But well, I kind of think you would be more or less tired of the usual questions, so I'm gonna be a little more specific, okay? So first of all, I would like to make an overall question about the population of the game. What do you think about the population in terms of numbers and skill?
So like number of players?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't typically talk about the number of players we have playing the game. I will say we have a vibrant audience. We have a very vibrant community. We get a lot of feedback. So we have a very engaged player base that we love working with because there's so much back and forth and a lot of feedback.
And what do you think about the average skill of the players?
Well, it's a bell curve, right? There's a wide range of players, all the way from new players who are just getting into Heroes of the Storm, all the way up to your pro HGC players who are the best of the best. So, I would say the average player follows somewhere in the middle of that bell curve. But I guess that's more of a statistical answer.
Yeah, I guess. But let's have a little look about, for example, the leagues, okay? When you're playing in, let's say, Diamond League, what usually happens, I don't know, I guess you're aware of it, is that you have players in one same league that have a way too different skill. You know what I mean? For example, if you're playing in Diamond 3, you get Diamond 3 players, and among these Diamond 3 players, there are players that have way more or way less skill.
Well, I would say that, we're matching players based off MMR, which is our hidden matchmaking rating, right? So the forward-facing Diamond 3, Diamond 2, and all that doesn't necessarily line up one-to-one with matchmaking, right? You can have players who have played all their games and they're at kind of the peak of where they're going to get for the season, whereas other players who are still on their way up to Master, Grandmaster, and so on. But even within that, even if you have two players who are Diamond 3 and they have the same matchmaking rating, I think you can have very large differences in just, not in terms of skill, but in terms of single game performance, right? I could be having an off game. Maybe I'm not playing my best character. Maybe my team needed a support, so I'm not the best support player, but I want to fill for my team and play that support. So I think you're going to have situations like that also.
Yeah, true that. But for example, of my own experience, I usually play on Master and Grandmaster leagues, okay? And you have one kind of issue, and it's that when you're playing on Grandmaster, if you don't queue at the same time than the other pro players, you usually get low quality games in regards of a skill, you know? What I mean is the players that are in there that are supposed to have the same knowledge as you do, they actually don't. And, well, I'm talking about what a lot of people feels, not only me, but the community feels that you're mixing players with different knowledge or sight of the game in the same leagues. So the MMR system is not working properly. What do you think about it?
I would say the MMR system is probably working. Like, matchmaking is a tricky solve, right? There's no silver bullet. There's no one thing we can do to make matchmaking perfect, right? It's all about iterating, making sure that it's a combination of having good match quality where you have players of similar skill and also not waiting too long for a match, right? Mm-hmm. For the players you're talking about, though, I think the top Grandmaster players, like those are when we go back to that bell curve, those are the players who are at the very top of our pool of players, right? So it is naturally players who skew to either side of matchmaking, it's going to be harder to find a good match for them, right? So I think that is not the experience for most of our audience, I would say.
Yeah, that's entirely true, but because the top tier players are a little small percentage of the population of the game, you have way more population in probably Diamond and Platinum.
Absolutely, right? Like,
of course.
I think we only rank 200 Grandmasters
exactly.
at the same time. But even, the best Grandmaster is going to be of a different skill level than the 100th or the 200th Grandmaster because those are the best players in the world, right?
And they should be.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's working as intended, that there are different player skills within Grandmaster, right? But again, like trying to find a perfect quality match for, say, the best player in the world, right? Like I would say most of the time we do make really good matches, but for those fringe cases where you're talking about really, really highly skilled players, you're not always going to get a perfect match.
And what do you think about the actual matchmaking and MMR system?
I mean, matchmaking MMR is definitely not my specialty. I would say it's a system, like I said, that we can always keep working on. Blizzard as a company has a long history of doing ladders and matchmaking and stuff like that from StarCraft 2, Warcraft 3, Brood War.
I was a Warcraft 3 player, and I enjoyed a lot the matchmaking in Warcraft 3. It was barely perfect.
I think one of the challenges with Heroes is it is a team-based game, right? So, like, you talk to any of our matchmaking guys, the complexity for doing good matchmaking in a 1v1, say StarCraft 2 as an example, is much lower than when you're doing matchmaking when you're including 5 players on each team who are also filling different roles and positions for their team as well.
Yeah, you're right. And do you think that the game is well focused on the competitive game, or could you do more things to improve that?
I think there's always things we can do to improve the game at all levels, not specifically competitive, but just across the board. But I think talking to competitive, I think the game's in a pretty good spot. We have our HGC, our Heroes Global Championship, which focuses on the best players in the world, provides constant source of great matches to watch. Pretty much every weekend you can go watch content, follow your favorite team from the start of the season all the way through to the finals. On the balance side, my team specifically, we do a lot of the balance, the talent updates, that kind of stuff. We're talking with pro players, with streamers and stuff like that to get their feedback. And we also watch HGC to see, so it's not that we're specifically balancing the game entirely for the pro players, but at the same time we're getting their feedback and we're making sure that we're making adjustments where necessary to give the best experience to all of our players, including the top players.
Yeah, of course, but it's true that you have to kind of divide the kind of population. You have the top scene of the game, and you of course have the casuals. So you have to make them both happy.
Absolutely, yeah.
But of course, the top tier population is way smaller than the other one.
Yeah, and I mean it's a balancing act, right? Like we oftentimes will have I get a lot of pro player feedback about Tassadar being too powerful. When is Tassadar going to get changes, right? Which is totally fair feedback. But on the flip side, Tassadar is a fairly low win rate ladder character, right? Like Tassadar at the pro scene could use some nerfs and some adjustments. Tassadar for 99% of the audience might need some buffs or tweaks, or maybe he's in a pretty good spot. So for those situations, it's
really hard to balance, right?
It's a balancing act for us to figure out, are there changes we can make to, say, Tassadar that would help out the pro scene, move him down slightly, while at the same time not affecting the large majority of our audience where Tassadar is maybe in a good spot.
And talking about that, one way of making this more viable for everyone would be like making something to the heroes that helps you to make better. I don't know how to say it.
I think I know what
that
you're saying,
rewards high skilled players by doing whatever. So that hero would be really powerful in the hands of the right players, but just decent in the hands of regular players.
Yeah, and that's something we often try and do, right? Like even Li Ming's trait, right? Li Ming is a very popular character. Ton of people play her. She's also pretty good at the pro scene, right? Yeah, exactly, right? When you get a takedown, you reset her abilities. You can use them again. Casual players who are newer to the game, aren't going to get as much value out of the resets because they're not going to use all their abilities that quickly, that kind of thing. Whereas a really experienced, maybe an HGC player, when they get a reset, they can use that to maybe even snowball a fight and really carry their team in that situation. So I think we definitely try and make tuning and design changes that allow for these differences as well.
Yeah, that's true, and I hope you can keep improving with that. And about this topic, one last question is that what would you do to try to attract more people with the pro player mindset? meaning that, as we said before, we have a lot of different players, and there are players that only play the game only to have fun, and they don't aim to that goal. But what would you do to attract this kind of people?
I think it's a challenging question. I think I would say probably most of our audience plays the game for fun, right? Like they enjoy the game, so that's why they're getting into it. And I think where you start getting into the pro players, the streamers and stuff, these are the players who are, in some cases, the most dedicated players. They're going to put in a ton of hours. So I think on the design side, we can definitely continue designing awesome characters who have a lot of potential, so that if you're a newer player and you hop in and maybe you play Probius and you're just okay with him, maybe a really skilled player can do things, more advanced plays and stuff like that with Probius that allow you to kind of get to that next level, and maybe that's kind of where you want to go, right? But
yeah.
Our goal is definitely not to bring everyone into like super high competitive grandmaster player or whatever, right? Because essentially only the best players can be the grandmasters anyway, right? So,
but you have to make happy everyone, of course. And well, now about talking about the draft, in the actual meta, you have to draft more or less, depending on the map, in a certain way. So when you're playing Hero League, you don't usually play the role you main, for example. So if you're playing certain maps, you have to try to pick Ragnaros or Sylvanas first pick, then you are kind of forced to go for Rhaegar, Malfurion, or even Lucio as support. So in the pick rotation, you need to pick the hero and not your role usually. So this kind of Hero League encourages you to play flex and don't main a role. So I think the easiest solution to this would be to put swaps into the Hero League. Do you have any plans to put that?
We want to put swaps in. We're not sure exactly which mode it's going in. We definitely want to add swaps to, I believe, Team League. So I could see swaps coming into Hero League play. It's a fair point. I think some of that comes down to balancing on our end. Like if Ragnaros has to be the first pick on a specific battleground, we can probably do better where there's at least several characters who would be a great first pick, right? So I think some of that comes down to balance and some characters maybe being too strong. In terms of having a main or having to play flex in Hero League, I've seen players who you look at the Grandmaster leaderboards and they have like 92% of their games are played as an assassin and they're one of the top Grandmasters, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is the ability to really still have a kind of a main role, like whether you're a support player for an HGC team, a lot of those players pretty much play exclusively support when they're laddering, and they have huge success with that.
But well, that's also because they know each other, and they know, okay, you play support, you play tank, you play melee assassin.
Yeah,
so
they're well-known players.
Yeah, exactly, and so they let them. But I think the swapping Hero League would balance a lot and will help a lot in the draft. So you will be able to play your best, and you will be able also to draft properly, and that will help a lot, I think.
Yeah, I think we're not against adding swaps. It is a feature we have to work on, but I think it's something we would be okay adding to the game.
I hope so, to be honest. And what about the third ban? Have you thought about it?
So I've talked to some of the pro players and stuff like that at this event. We've talked about the ban system and stuff like that. I think when we had a smaller number of heroes, it didn't make sense to add any more bans, right? Like we don't want to ban out too many characters from our roster. I think we're now 60 to 65 heroes, somewhere in that range. So I think we're getting to the point where we could have discussions about adding maybe more bans. I'm not sure if it's necessary, but as we add more characters, right, the bans become a little less meaningful because you can't ban out as many of the top heroes, for example.
Yeah, of course, but I think that probably, well, this is of course my opinion, when we get like 4 more heroes, I think a third ban will be needed. At least in competitive, I think would be really necessary.
I think it's something I can definitely bring up to the team. We're definitely open to all this feedback on, if there needs to be more bans and stuff like that.
Well, then you got mine. And what do you think of the actual meta?
Right now, I think the meta is in an okay spot. I think the biggest thing that we're trying to address from my team is we're seeing a little bit too much Bruiser play, a little bit too much like Zarya, Medivh, Tassadar, kind of these comps that are pretty hard to kill. We've definitely gone through cycles where we had some blow-up comps, which are focused on just chain CCing, eliminating a character really quickly. We've had some double support comps in the past.
Yeah.
But I think at this point we're kind of in a... you could almost call it like a low lethality kind of situation where you're playing with a bruiser and a warrior, maybe a second warrior, a support, so that all your characters are very hard to
We're
pick
watching
off.
a lot of front lane
Yes.
drafts and a lot of sustained drafts.
Yeah.
And as you said before, I completely agree. We've been like transitioning in different metas. We started for the CC meta that everyone wanted only the stance and then the burst.
Yes.
And then from that, when you nerf the CC, you went only for burst, but still with CC. Then we go to double support, and now we're going through the bruiser, tanky, more sustained fights. I will never forget the time where the team who got Tyrande would win the game instantly.
Tyrande and Diablo was a thing.
And if you didn't get Diablo, you got ETC or Muradin.
Right.
But the main thing is, what I'm trying to ask is, what's the goal? I mean, what point do you want to reach for the game in the meta?
So I think our goal would be ideally that there are a lot of different viable playstyles and viable comps. So I think it's totally okay that we have a bruiser heavy comp that is one way to play, but we don't want that to be necessarily the only way to play or the best way to play. I think there are some solves we can do. One thing I was talking about someone with is right now, a lot of battlegrounds, the strategy relies on having a hero kind of act as your solo laner and they win their lane. So whether it's Brax's holdout and you have one hero top lane, whether it's Chen or Sonya or whoever, there's a lot of battlegrounds that is kind of the playstyle that the players have kind of grown towards. And I think in the past we had characters like Zagara who aren't a bruiser.
Who is Zagara again?
Exactly, right? You have a character like Zagara who's more of a ranged assassin, that kind of character who kind of changes up the meta a little bit because now you don't have to run a bruiser to win your lane. You can win it with her. But the meta has transitioned away from that. We made some nerfs to Zagara, and now you pretty much use a bruiser to win your lane.
Yeah.
So I think potentially we can make changes to characters like Zagara, maybe Zul'jin, other characters that they can actually kind of fill like a DPS role, a ranged DPS role, and they can also win their lane. And then now you don't necessarily have to run like a multiple bruiser heavy frontline comp.
Well, I think like gaining a little bit more sustain will help that. And one last question, and it's more like a suggestion. Did you play Warcraft 3?
I played
back in the days?
a ton of Warcraft 3. Yeah.
Do you remember the tournaments, the weekly tournaments inside the game, with all the improvements of Heroes 2.0? I think that it would be a great idea to implement something like that, like weekly tournaments to encourage people to play Team League and give them like portraits or something like that. I think that will encourage people to know more players and to try to find more players and play the game and play Team League.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we added automated tournaments to StarCraft 2. I think it's a great system that we would love to someday bring to Heroes of the Storm. I don't have any details on when that would happen, but those systems in Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2 are awesome, and I think those are absolutely things we do want to add to Heroes of the Storm.
I really hope so, and I'm looking forward to see all the changes we've been seeing today and for the rest of the year. So, well, thank you very much, man.
Awesome, thank you.
Really, really happy to meet you and keep the good work.
Cool.
Thank you, man.